Welcome to today's Explainer. If you're stepping into a role as a healthcare operations associate, you are literally the frontline defense against revenue leakage. It's a wildly complex, multi-payer healthcare system out there. And honestly, every single dollar that flows into a healthcare organization starts with the exact foundational work we're going to cover today. If the data isn't absolutely perfect before a patient even sees a doctor, the whole financial engine just grinds to a halt. So we're going to break down exactly how to build that flawless foundation block by block.
Okay, let's dive into the structured roadmap for today's foundational modules. We'll be hitting the ecosystem hook, governing bodies, and identifiers masterclass, our tech stack, and then we'll wrap up with a recap and next steps.
All right, moving right into Section 1, the ecosystem hook. Let's look at the macro view of how money actually moves here.
To really understand your role, we have to walk through the multi-payer financial flow step by step. First, patients pay their premium to the payer, the insurance company. Then, those payers pay reimbursement back to the providers. But here is the absolutely critical third step. Providers only get paid if they successfully bill those payers through a process called RCM, or Revenue Cycle Management. The stakes here are incredibly high, guys. If the front end fails, if there's a single hiccup, this entire revenue stream stops dead in its tracks. Claims get rejected, and providers literally don't get paid for the life-saving work they do.
And that brings us right to pre-RCM. This is your domain. Pre-RCM is everything, and I mean absolutely everything that happens before a claim is actually submitted to a payer. We're talking credentialing, enrollment, data setup, the whole shebang. Your precise role as ops associates is building this flawless foundation so that clean claims go out, reimbursement comes back faster, and claims absolutely never get rejected because of an administrative typo.
Let's move on to Section 2, governing bodies. Time to talk about the rule makers who set the strict compliance boundaries we have to navigate every single day.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how these four completely different entities interlock to govern absolute compliance across the board. First up, CMS. They govern Medicare, Medicaid, and CHIP, and honestly, their rules set the standard for everyone else. Then there's the OIG. There's the watchdogs investigating fraud and abuse. Next is the NCQA, who accredit provider credentialing and payer processes. And of course, HIPAA and HITECH, which strictly regulate privacy and data handling. You've got to thread the needle through all four of these to keep your organization fully compliant.
Section 3, Identifiers Masterclass. Let's zoom in from that macro ecosystem down to the daily technical tools you'll be handling.
The core of this alphabet soup is the NPI, or National Provider Identifier. It's a 10-digit structure managed via the NPPES system, but you've got to understand the difference between the two types. Type 1 is for an individual provider, so think Dr. Smith. Type 2, on the other hand, is for an organization or facility, like XYZ Clinic. You cannot mix these up. If you accidentally use a Type 2 facility NPI when you need an individual one, you are looking at a completely failed claim match. Perfect claim matching relies heavily on keeping these two totally separate.
Next up, taxonomy codes. These are 10-character alphanumeric classifications that determine a provider's exact scope of practice. For example, 207R000000X is for internal medicine. And I need to explicitly warn you right here, if you have a mismatched character, especially a mismatched leading character, it means an immediate claim rejection. The payers simply won't recognize the specialty, which means delayed revenue and a ton of manual rework for you.
Now, don't confuse that CMS taxonomy code with a payer's specialty code. A CMS taxonomy code is a universal 10-character alphanumeric code used everywhere in the industry. A specialty code, though, is a payer-specific internal classification. For instance, United Healthcare might just use the code 311 for a pediatrician. Confusing the universal CMS code with a specific payer's internal code is a classic trap. It leads to wrong contract rates being applied and some really messy reimbursement disputes.
Let's look at tax IDs. Both are 9 digits, but they do very different jobs. You have your TIN or EIN, which is an IRS ID used specifically for tax and reimbursement. This is exactly what you use for validating IRS W-9 forms and billing profiles. On the flip side, an SSN is a Social Security Administration ID used for background checks or for providers operating as sole proprietors. Knowing exactly when to use an EIN versus an SSN is a game changer for keeping those payer profiles totally clean.
And while we're talking about SSNs, listen up, because this is a strict, non-negotiable compliance alert. HIPAA and HITECH absolutely require mandatory encryption and secure handling of SSNs. You have to avoid storing SSNs in plain text documents or basic spreadsheets. Seriously, no exceptions. Unsecured SSNs are a massive legal penalty waiting to happen, so secure handling is your absolute responsibility.
Section 4. Tech Stack. Let's pivot to the enablers, the modern tech solutions that make managing this complex data scalable and error-free.
Check out this matrix of modern tools. We're definitely not checking government websites by hand anymore. The NPPES API auto-verifies NPI and taxono codes in a flash. We use Salesforce Health Cloud for centralized provider lifecycle management. Then there's CAQH ProView to sync data automatically with commercial payers. And for those repetitive tasks, we deploy RPA bots like UiPath that automatically extract and validate NPI and TIN entries right off W-9s. These tools work together to auto-verify credentials and basically streamline everything.
But tech is only as good as your processes. Here are some absolute pre-RCM best practices. First, you need to maintain a provider master tracker with real-time status updates. Always preload CageQ and PCOS data before the provider's official joining date. And please, regularly reconcile the NPI, CageQ, PCOS, and state boards. Reconciling data across these systems early prevents incredibly costly downstream enrollment rejections.
All right, Section 5, Recap and Next Steps. So, the crucial point is, let's summarize what we've learned before we conclude this foundational module.
Here is your crisp 3-point summary to lock in. 1. Ecosystem. A perfectly clean pre-RCM front end is exactly what drives multi-payer revenue. 2. Compliance. CMS, OIG, NCQA, and HIPAA define the absolute boundaries we work within. And 3. Identifiers. The precise accuracy of the NPI, taxonomy, and TIN is exactly what dictates clean claim success. Mastering these core identifiers is literally the absolute key to keeping corporate revenue flowing.
So, I'll leave you with a high-stakes question to chew on. If just one mismatched NPI digit or taxonomy character can halt millions of dollars in revenue, are you prepared to master the advanced NCQA and URAC credentialing frameworks in Part 2? It gets more complex from here, but you've built the foundation. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and I will catch you in Part 2.